Welcome to Made in Carolina. I'm Lolita Rowe, your host. This podcast explores the people, places, and histories that shape North and South Carolina, especially the stories often left out of textbooks. This season, we're diving into submerged towns, where engineered lakes swallowed entire communities. From schools and farms to churches and cemeteries, all once vibrant before the land was flooded. For each story, we'll look at three parts: life before the dam, the building of the lake, and the memories of the families who once called these places home. I may highlight specific towns or broader themes, but every story is part of the larger history of both states.
Can I have a conversation with you, sunshine?
Let's start by looking at Lake Murray, the lake that now fills this landscape, once home to thriving communities, farms, and families. Seeing it today helps us understand what was lost and what stories remain. Lake Murray is massive. It stretches across Lexington, Newberry, Saluda, and Richland counties in South Carolina. Lake Murray covers about 50,000 acres with more than 500 miles of shoreline. Construction of the dam began in 1927, and upon its completion in 1930, it became one of the largest artificial reservoirs in the world. Its main purpose? Hydroelectric power. Even today, it provides energy, water, and recreation for thousands of people across the region.
Can I have a conversation with you, sunshine?
But before there was a lake, there was land, and thriving communities lived here. Families farmed the fertile soil, raised livestock, and built schools, churches, and general stores. The Saluda River Valley was dotted with small towns and settlements. These weren't just points on a map, they were homes where generations grew up, prayed together, and buried their loved ones. To help us understand the history of this area and before the waters rose, I spoke with J.R. Fennel, who has studied this history in depth. I'll let him introduce himself.
My name is J.R. Fennel. I'm director of the Lexington County Museum in Lexington, South Carolina.
And can you give us a brief history of the area that would eventually become Lake Murray? And what was that region like before the lake was created?
Yeah, I have trouble being brief sometimes, but I'll try. Yeah, so to make kind of a long story short, this area was inhabited before colonization by a tribe called the Congaree, and they were a tribe that kind of, they roamed around, I think, following prey. Moved with the seasons, that sort of stuff. But they were the ones who were here at the time of colonization. The colony of South Carolina um, engaged in a war with the Yamasee tribe. They were down in the Low Country, starting in 1715. The Yamasee believed they were going to be attacked by the colony, so they attacked first. And of course, that set off kind of a chain reaction where tribes across the backcountry, as this area was called, it had to kind of decide whether to join in on the side of the colony or the side of the Yamasee, and most of them decided to join on the side of the Yamasee. So the Congaree, along with some other backcountry tribes, joined together. They went down. They were defeated at a battle with the colonial militia. They retreated, and the Congaree were kind of, they were low in number to begin with because of disease. And so they decided to leave this area and eventually joined up with the Catawba. This area was pretty much vacant after around 1718 or so. The Yamasee were defeated for the and retreated to Spanish Florida, where they continued to raid the colony of South Carolina. But either way, the Yamasee War, for all intents and purposes, was over after that point. And so the colony of South Carolina was devastated, economically, physically, and kind of, I like to say, mentally as well. And it really caused things to change, and it caused a lot of fear. And so they began a trading relationship with the Cherokee for the first time. and became major trading partners. But they were still kind of afraid that the Cherokee may attack like the Yamasee. And you also had the Creek, who they were enemies with. The French, of course, the settlers here were English, and the French have, been kind of enemies with the English forever. And so they were worried about kind of those people that they thought could harm them that were surrounding them. So they wanted some way to try to protect the frontier, protect their borders. And at the same time, during this time period, they were importing a huge number of enslaved Africans to work in the rice plantations in the Low Country. And so they began to, of course, worry about a possible slave rebellion. And so there was, of course, a population imbalance between enslaved and free. And so a governor named Robert Johnson in the 1730s came up with an idea where basically he said, we've got this vacant land. Why don't we open it up for settlement? We'll bring in more white Protestants. And number one, that will provide kind of a buffer between the Cherokee and the Creek and the Low Country, where most of the people were, where the government was, where the money was. And, so if the French or the Cherokee were to attack, they would absorb the blow. And, the people in the Low Country would have time to prepare and maybe retreat to the walled city of Charleston. But it also would bring in more white Protestants, like I said, to help balance out the population. So to bring in more free whites. And so to do this, they established what were called townships. And so here in what would become Lexington County, they established a township called the Congarese at first in 1733, and then it was renamed Saxe-Gotha in 1736 after a German princess who married into the English royal family. And they started to attract to this area, at first, German-speaking Swiss people, and then later, especially in the early 1750s, what we consider to be Germans. And so many of them started to come to the area that they moved and started to settle across the Saluda River and to the north side of the Saluda, in the area between the Broad and the Saluda. And it became known as the Deutsch Fork, Deutsch being the German word for German. And then got corrupted to Dutch. And so that's how we get the term Dutch Fork, which is kind of, what that area between the Broad and the Saluda is called today. And so they brought with them their traditions, their food. A lot of the, especially Germans, were Lutheran. So there's a large number of Lutheran churches there today. They were known to be loyal to the state, but they were also known to be very thrifty, I guess is a good way to put it. A lot of people today would call it cheap. so,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stories about that. Supposedly, one man in the Dutch Fork, he, when this was, I think, like 40 years ago, but he only bought one light bulb for his house. And, he took it from room to room, is what I've been told. I don't know how true that is, but so the other, thing they brought with them was their superstitions. And so they were, very concerned with the possibility of being hexed. They believed in witches. They believed in ghosts. They thought you could be cursed. And so you had to kind of watch out and protect yourself. And so they used various ways of doing that. But if you found yourself hexed, there were certain things you could do to cure the hex. A lot of times it depended on the curse. But one particular cure that became popular in the 1820s was the idea that you could draw a picture of the person you thought was hexing you. And then you could get a silver bullet, shoot it at that drawing. Wherever it hit that drawing, it would hurt that person and they would drop the hex. So
wait a minute. A silver bullet? I thought that was just for like werewolves.
I don't know, why. I mean, I don't know if it had to do with, the kind of biblical story of Judas and all this, but silver apparently is something that kind of cures all kinds of evil, according to the.
Now I'm like, I need to do some research on, German hexes and in colonial and the 1800s. That's not what I was. This is the stuff that they don't teach us in history class. Like I grew up in Lexington County, and the information that you're giving me, I always wondered why there were German sounding names in the areas. But I don't mean to interrupt. Please continue. That is just an interesting fact.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I agree with the fact that a lot of this local history just isn't taught, unfortunately. So, but yeah, so they also, that if you got got the silver bullet, you're supposed to shoot at that drawing. So apparently, in the 1820s, there was a person who was a blacksmith here in the town of Lexington who said that if you brought him a silver dollar, he would melt it down and give you a silver bullet. And so it turns out they found out that he was pocketing those silver dollars and giving everybody a tin bullet. So he was making some money like that. Oh man. So anyway, yeah. But so they were, the people that settled there were very superstitious. It's kind of interesting. The Saluda River was something that both economically vital in terms of providing water power for mills. Sawmills were plentiful, grist mills, but it also was a hindrance in some ways because it, provided a barrier between the Dutch Fork and the rest of Lexington County. And so the courthouse and jail were located in the town of Lexington after 1820. And, to get there, you had to cross the river. And so that meant using a ferry most of the time. And so ferries were, super important. And a lot of the, road names in Lexington today, they're named after the roads to those ferries. So you have Cox Ferry Road, Wise Ferry, Holly Ferry. I mean, a lot of different names like that kind of showed their importance. And, but the ferry had to depend on the weather. So if the water was too high, you would not be able to, travel across it. It was just too dangerous. So it's something that, I think we don't really think about today. It's just kind of, how bad, not how bad, but how much the river could impact travel and that sort of thing. Yeah.
And the economy too.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They built a bridge over the Saluda in 1911, and this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but this bridge is actually still underneath the waters of Lake Murray, so you can see it if you have sonar on your boat. You can actually see it. It's a steel bridge, so it's still down there. There's scuba divers who have kind of gone down and taken video of it. It's very creepy. I think just
Yeah.
just kind of comes out of nowhere.
And even thinking about like a bridge and how much height it has to have over the water, that Lake Murray is that deep that a bridge can be underwater
Mhm.
and you can be over it on a boat
Yes.
and not even like scrape against it.
Oh
It's
yeah, yeah.
wild.
So far down. Yeah.
It's amazing. I have a video of them like building the dam and just how they dug so deep. And I'm just like, sorry, I'm a nerd. I was just thinking about like, Lord of the Rings of like they dug so deep. It's just like the depth is amazing. But I digress.
Yeah.
so, so these communities that were thriving on the river, what were they like?
Yeah. So, Lexington County, like a lot of places in South Carolina, was mainly agricultural, and the Dutch Fork and the area that would become flooded by Lake Murray was no different. So a lot of farmers. It's kind of interesting that you had a lot of smaller farms. You did not have a large number of kind of plantations like you saw down in the Low Country or in Richland County. And of course, but that does not mean that there were not enslaved people in the communities before the Civil War. There were, and a lot of these small family farms, did enslave people. But these communities, they were small. They were not really towns. You would not call them a town or definitely not a city. And that's something that we kind of have to constantly push back on with people around here, because people will call up and be like, man, there's a whole city underneath the lake. I'm like, no, it's not true.
Yeah.
But they were small communities, farming communities. And so you had three churches that were flooded by the waters of Lake Murray, and then you had six schools that were flooded and had to be moved. And so there were schools, there were churches, there were stores, there were historic homes. So a lot of different things were covered by the waters of Lake Murray.
Were there any battle sites or any historically significant areas people would go to and say, "Oh yeah, my the battle of such and such was fought here"?
There weren't any battle sites that I'm aware of. You did have, I believe it's underneath the waters of Lake Murray now, a colonial. It was called a fort. I don't think it's kind of like a fort like we think of today. But to make a long story short, unfortunately, the colonists made, with the Yamasee, they made a lot of mistakes, and then they repeated those same mistakes with the Cherokee. It seems like, and a lot of people don't learn a lot of times from their history.
History repeats itself
That's
over
right.
and over.
Exactly. So the Cherokee, declared war on the colony of South Carolina in 1760. And so there were a few kind of fortified houses around. So these were kind of people's houses that had a palisade wall on it and maybe some other buildings. And so they were used for refuge during the Cherokee War when there were either Cherokee warriors in the area or rumors of Cherokee warriors. And then again, during the American Revolution, sometimes these were used as kind of places of refuge. And so there's one called Fort Fairchild, and I believe it was underneath the waters of Lake Murray. So it was significant in terms of the military, but no battle sites. You did have. I found a newspaper article that mentioned that a Native American mound, an Indian mound, was covered up by the waters of Lake Murray. There was, I think, a professor from University of South Carolina who was very saddened by this and was trying to rush to try to do some kind of excavation. And I don't know if he was successful, but there were some, I think, significant archaeological sites that were covered.
Before Lake Murray ever existed, this land was home to thriving communities that would soon face upheaval as the dam project began.
It's very fascinating to kind of study the history of the development of the lake and to see, kind of how it developed. And it's amazing just to kind of think about the amount of labor that went into it. And it involved, acquiring the land. It required cutting down trees, milling that lumber, building concrete forms, building railroad trestles, and moving all that dirt, digging the dirt, placing it, and then getting, spraying the walls with water so that it creates an impervious core. I mean, just a huge undertaking, and to think they did it, before kind of modern equipment is just mind blowing in some cases.
In our next episode, we will dig into how Lake Murray was built, the construction of the dam, the displacement of entire communities, and even the lake's surprising role during World War II. Many thanks to J.R. Fennel for guiding us through this first episode and sharing his expertise. You'll also hear more from him in the next 2 episodes as we continue unfolding the story of Lake Murray. The original score and theme music for Made in Carolina is by Sister Sai. Additional sound effects were sourced from Freesound. Full credits are listed in the show notes. If you enjoyed this first episode of our Submerged Towns mini-series on Made in Carolina, be sure to follow the podcast wherever you listen. Share it with a friend who loves history, and leave a review so more people can discover the stories of North and South Carolina. You've been listening to Made in Carolina, created, produced, and hosted by me, Lolita Rowe. Thanks for joining me, and remember, the past is never truly gone. Sometimes it's just waiting beneath the surface to be uncovered.
I know half the world is waiting on